So the going is going. Hello, people. Welcome back for another episode of Things I Talk About. It is Friday, the 29th of August, 2025. Coming to you live from northern Israel. And what is happening with the war? Well, and the war, of course, the one I'm speaking of is the one between Israel and Hamas, the Houthis, Hezbollah, and of course Iran. Right? What is happening? Jesus, unbelievable. The things people drop in the most unseemly places. You'd think they'd be more careful. Now I have to throw that away because that should not be in a place in public, especially not where there are such elderly people around, and young people, and all these kind of the highly inappropriate things people do is unbelievable. Anyway, um, so what is happening in this war between Israel, the Houthis, the Hamas, the Hezbollah, and Iran? Well, if you've seen the news lately, you will know, right, that there have been uh, changes lately. There are incidents you could point to. One of those incidents is, of course, the the bombing at the Nasser hospital in Gaza by the IDF, which was followed by a second shell some moments later, which caused the initial responders, the first responders, to get wounded and even killed. And in that initial bombing, the target was actually a security camera. So you could say it's a little bit of a hitting a mosquito with a hammer rather than a mosquito swatter or a zapper or something. It was a bit unnecessary. No, it was extremely unnecessary, to be honest. They could have easily just gone to that location. Not easily, but they could have gone to that location and physically taken down that camera. Or they could have, I mean, that's of course risky because the whole point of that camera was to surveil the Israeli soldiers, thus putting them at risk every time they walk by the thing, because the Hamas soldiers were using that information in real time to attack them. So fair, don't send your soldiers there to take it down, but they could have sniped the thing from a few hundred meters away. That's almost an inarguable point, right? Like they could have done that. They did not need to um, bomb the thing. Right? That's the mistake of war. That's why I always say war is filled with mistakes. There's no such thing as a perfect war, right? War is filled with mistakes. And it's horrible. And that's why I always say war is hell. War sucks. War is the evil thing we all want to avoid if we are decent human beings, right? We should not want war. We should want peace. And the people that seek war, they are the enemies of the people who seek peace. Like 100%, no question about it. Right? The people that seek peace need to defend themselves against the people who seek war. So the people who seek peace should not start the wars, but they have every right to end them when they are started upon them. And if you tell me, but it has to be proportional, no, war is not about being proportional. I'm sorry. And yes, it makes sense logically to say it should be proportional. I get it, logically. War isn't about logic, unfortunately. If war was about logic, there wouldn't be any, okay? Because there would be logical, reasonable, wise, peaceful ways to solve things all the time. Unfortunately, sometimes people start wars or provoke wars to happen. And nations need to sometimes, and people need to sometimes defend themselves against those who are provoking or starting the war. And logic goes out the window when that happens. Yes, in one sense, you need to always keep your cool if you are on the side of good and try to do the right and wise and courageous and ethical thing. It's true. But sometimes, as in the case of wanting to finish the war quickly, you need to apply such pressures to the enemy such that the enemy will surrender as quickly as possible. The difference between Israel and its enemies is that Israel has Judeo values, Judeo Christian values, you can call them, Judeo Christian Western values, you can call them, whatever you want to call them. We believe in things like mercy. We believe in not, yes, we've had our dark ages in the Jewish religion and in the Christian religion also. And we've also had enlightenment and Renaissance and post-Renaissance and getting rid of abolition of slavery and getting, transforming ourselves into better human beings, right? The difference is that the religion of Islam has not had that, right? The only interpretations that they have in Islam are hadith, which are fairy tales mostly, that interpret what the Quran says. Each of them a little passage of the Quran or whatever. They explain something about their religion. Because the Quran for a lot of people apparently is not clear and obvious. To me, it's always been pretty clear and pretty obvious. If you read it literally, it's pretty clear in what it says. The hadiths are just, interpretations of that, but they're not interpretations that seek to modernize the religion in any way. No. They are interpretations that just simply seem to explain it from the point of view of whoever was telling that story. So Islam has not had any kind of revision of the Quran to keep it up with the times, so to speak, because according to that religion, you're not allowed to change the interpretations of the Quran. It's forbidden. It can never change. But it needs to change, or else it will become ever increasingly more obsolete and incompatible with living in the modern world. It already is by centuries, right? But it will continue to be ever increasingly incompatible with the modern world as time goes by, because it's not acceptable to most people to do many of the things that are expressly stated as acceptable in the Quran. Like, they're talking about the bad things, yeah, like keeping slaves and conquering lands in the name of Allah, and then raping all the people that you don't kill and taking them as sex slaves and all that stuff. It's not acceptable. But in Islam, it's acceptable because it says so in the Quran. It's not acceptable for most human beings to marry a child at the age of 6 and consummate the marriage at the age of 9. That's not acceptable. But in Islam, according to the actual literature that is in even the interpretations of it and the hadiths, yeah, it says very clearly Aisha was 6 years old when Muhammad and Aisha were married, and she was 9 years old when he completed, consummated the marriage. And there's even a passage, I think it's a hadith that says Aisha, saying that, she was a young girl and she used to play with her dolls, and with her, her friends would come over and play with her, and they would play with her dolls. Implying very clearly that she was a very young girl and not a woman, as so many people like to pretend. Oh, no, she was 19. No, she wasn't 19. What, they couldn't count? Really? The people that, took the invention of the zero and gave it to the world of, of Islam, and then to the rest of the world. They took the concept, they were able to give us the concept of zero. They were able to come up with algebra. They were able to come up with algorithms, but they couldn't count her age. because Muhammad was just an illiterate dummy? What, all his scribes were dummies too? No. Don't don't remove responsibility from him just because you want to romanticize some perverse fiction in your head. You know that Aisha was 6 years old when he married her, and that she was 9 when he consummated the marriage, according to the scripts. According to the scriptures. Now, do I personally believe that all the holy scriptures are correct? Every last word? No, I don't. First of all, I'm not a Muslim, so clearly I don't believe in the Quran. Certainly not as Muhammad as a prophet to me. Um, but the point is, it's still a literature that these people use as the foundation of their religion. Again, I have literally nothing against people who want to believe in that religion, believe in it, but don't bring harm to anyone else. The problem is you can't really believe in that religion 100% and be like conservative about it and like literally interpret it literally without having contradictions, you know, without living contradictions, because it compels people, for example, since the time of Muhammad, to be in a state of jihad. There has never been a time in Islam where the entire Muslim world has actually not been in a state of jihad. At least some portion of it has not been in some state of jihad. Even now, when you have countries seeking publicly and outwardly to do peace with Israel and all this stuff, and some of them have made peace with Israel, great, wonderful. Maybe they're all lying through their teeth, and one day when they get the chance, they'll all backstab us. Personally, I'm of the belief that if they have peace with Israel long enough, eventually those feelings of hatred will change and go away. But they won't actually go away as long as, I mean, for all of Islam, yeah, or for all of the Muslim nations, and certainly not for all of the Arab nations, until they actually come to terms with, you know, the fact that they're no longer in a jihad. They need to accept that, yes, we understand your holy books tell you that there's the house of peace, which is like where everything is already Muslim, which you call peace. It's not what I would call it, but that's what you call it. Then there's the house of war, where everything is already, you know, is in a state of war. It's everything that's not in the house of peace, right? So everything that's not already Muslim is in a state of war, as far as you're concerned, if you're a Muslim, if you're a devout Muslim. And that's, you need to come to terms with the fact that you're not going to rule the world, right? And if you try to, by using sort of words as your modern sword, because you realize you don't have the kinetic power, at least not yet, not at this stage, you don't have the kinetic power anymore to try to actually physically conquer the world by force. So you're going to try to conquer the world with words, and then use that to overpower the countries that you've infiltrated in large numbers through immigration and other means, birth rates, etc., and try to either forcibly convert more and more people, or even majorities of people in countries that are now overwhelmingly Christian, for example, in Europe and in the United States. And you're going to try to literally take over the world that way. To you, the holy war, doesn't matter what means you use, right? It could be physical brutality of swords or guns or missiles. It could be words. It could be all the above. Doesn't matter if you're a devout literalist of Islam. Thankfully, not every Muslim is that way. I would even dare say probably most Muslims are not that way, okay? But it is the small, aggressive minority that is, which is the problem. Because they're the ones who are causing the problems, right? They're the ones that actually the focus needs to be put upon, and that need to be monitored, supervised, challenged, and that we need to effectively get rid of their aggression, right? So that's a view of that particular philosophy, right? is that as long as that philosophy believes it's in a state of war with the entire world that isn't yet Muslim, right, or that once was and is no longer, but even so, even that is not enough. Like, yes, technically, of course, as far as Islam is concerned, any land that was Muslim in the past, even if it was reconquered, like Andalusia, Spain, right? Even though it was reconquered by the Spanish, as far as the Muslims are concerned, as far as Islam is concerned, Islam has to reconquer that land, and Muslims believe that they should do that if they're devout followers to the letter, without veering in any way, shape, or form in any interpretation. They believe that they should reconquer the southern half of Spain. But guess what? They also believe they should conquer the rest of Spain and the rest of Western Europe and the rest of the free world and the rest of the world at large. Like, they really believe that if they're actually 100% literalists. And that is a problem. How can you make peace with people who do not believe you have the right to exist as you are? You don't have the right to believe in the God you believe in. You don't have the right to be an equal in the society in any society that they rule. And that the only reason they would ever grant equality in any society is as a temporary distraction or delusion to fool people until the time is right that they can get rid of those equalities and give themselves ethno supremacy again. Have literally apartheid, which they have in almost every single Arab country and Muslim country. Now, I know there are some that don't. There's some where they have relative equality, relative. But even in countries where they have relative equality, relative is the key word. Because even in those places, you will not find ever the possibility of somebody who is not of that ethnicity or of that religious ideology being allowed to hold the highest office, or being allowed to be a member of the Supreme Court, or being allowed, actual 100% full equality. You won't find it. And then they pretend that Israel, then they, in order to deflect from the fact that they're so obviously apartheid, they're so obviously racist, they're so obviously misogynist, they're so obviously full of hate and ethno supremacist, they will point at Israel, and any tiny little thing that happens in Israel that doesn't fully, give every single thing over to the Palestinians immediately and completely. Say, oh, Israel's an ethno-apartheid state. No, Israel's not an ethno-apartheid state. There's literally no apartheid in Israel. And when people say, oh, why should Israel be an ethno-supremacist state? People who say that often are brainwashed idiots from the West who themselves live in ethno-supremacist countries. If you live in America, yeah, land of the free, home of the brave, freedom of religion and all that, but it's a largely Christian country. If you don't understand that, you're an idiot. It is a largely ethno-supremacist state because it's largely a country full of white people who run the country. Yes, I know. There's 15% black people, 20% Hispanics, and overall now whites are no longer the majority of the population because there's a lot of brown people from all over the world who live in America. Whites are still the single biggest group of people in America. It is still a white country. It is still a Christian country. Yes, it is a white Christian country. Yes, it's a country of freedom of religion, no problem, absolutely. But it was founded on Christianity, on Christianity. It was founded by Christians and by atheists, but they had Judeo-Christian values, even the atheists among them. And for God's sake, they literally just discussed using Hebrew as the national language instead of English. Not even joking. Ben Franklin proposed it. Among other things, he also proposed making the turkey the national bird. How glorious would that be instead of the bald eagle? Personally, I'm glad they chose the bald eagle, but it just tells you where Ben Franklin's head was at. He's like, yeah. Of course, turkeys didn't look anything like they look now 250 years ago, 275 years ago, right? They looked 250 years ago. They looked very different. They're much skinnier, If you ever shot wild turkey, you know it's nothing like the kind of turkeys you go and buy a butterball turkey in the supermarket these days, right? It's nothing like that, right? Not nearly as plump and fatty and meaty as your typical butterball turkey is. Even the name butterball turkey should tell you everything you need to know about today's turkeys versus the turkeys that a Ben Franklin peer in time might have hunted. Nevertheless, they were big birds relatively, and that's why it's just funny that it was almost the national bird instead of the eagle or the eagle, as some people like to say. But anyway, so Hebrew was literally the national language of the United States, but it isn't, because in their wisdom they chose English, since most people in the country spoke English and not necessarily Hebrew, right? As many Bible thumpers as there were at the time living in the United States or in the Americas, in North America, there were far more people who spoke English than Hebrew. So choosing English was frankly a wise decision. But let's be real for a minute. Like, who is actually causing the war to continue right now? Right? Is it Iran? Is it the Houthis? Is it the Hezbollah? We know that the Hezbollah has begged for help and not received any from Iran. That happened during the 12 days of war of fighting, when Iran was expecting Hezbollah to participate, and Hezbollah said no thanks. And then when Hezbollah asked for help, because they were facing a lot of rejection by the Lebanese government, and they were facing demands by the Lebanese government to put away their weapons and get out of town, and the Hezbollah refused. So Israel has openly declared that it would help the Lebanese government to get rid of the Hezbollah. And we know that this upsets the Hezbollah because they've been protesting against it now, politically protesting at diplomatic, quote unquote, diplomatic levels or political levels, because yes, they actually have a political. And we know that Hezbollah is actually in grave danger of losing not just their political standing in Lebanon, but actually losing their operational base there. Like, there's a non-zero chance that Hezbollah will not be a fully functioning organization, certainly not a fully functioning terror organization in Lebanon in the coming months, if the pressure is maintained on them by the international community, notably by France and the US and, of course, Israel, as well as Lebanon. The Lebanese are sick and tired of Hezbollah because the Hezbollah has caused nothing but problems for Lebanon for decades. They came to liberate Jerusalem. Sure, good luck. No, they didn't do that. They came to defend Lebanon. Sure, good luck. They didn't do that either. So what they actually achieved in Lebanon for the Lebanese people, other than bringing death and destruction and corruption and misery and strife and poverty? What have they actually done? Name one positive thing. If you're going to tell me, oh, they brought healthcare to the Lebanese, man, the Lebanese had a working country before the Hezbollah ever showed up. They had a working country before the PLO ever showed up. But then the PLO began to destroy the country, brought it to civil war. And then when they were kicked out, the Hezbollah did the same thing.
They brought more death and destruction to that country.
Okay, these are just facts. Like, you don't have to like it. It's still just a fact. You can be opposed to all the facts, but they are still facts. You can go ahead and Google
Every single fact I tell you.
it doesn't change the fact that they're still facts. In fact, I recommend that you do that. Don't just take my word for it. Just because I tell you a fact, it doesn't mean I expect you to believe it. No, it means I expect you, if you care about this topic, if you don't know about these facts, and I tell you something that you don't know, that you go and Google it and find out for yourself if what I'm telling you is true or not. Right? I don't want you to just believe me on faith. No, absolutely not. I wouldn't believe anybody on faith. Why, like when it comes to such political discussions, why would I expect you to believe me on faith? That's ridiculous. I'm not going to be a hypocrite about this kind of stuff. It's important to be straightforward and tell you straight up what's happening, right? And for you to go and know the information for yourself. You can literally Google every phrase I've said in this video about the facts, and you'll find what I'm saying is true. Like 100%. And I'm not, I have no need to lie to you about it. It doesn't benefit me in any way to lie to you about it. So Israel versus the Hamas versus, the Houthis and the Hezbollah and Iran. The head of the snake remains Iran, right? When I say Iran, I obviously mean the dictatorship of the Islamic Republic, currently dictating and oppressing its rule and oppressing the people of Iran with its evil rule. And I say evil rule because they are truly a perverse and evil, interpretation. But you could say, well, they're just being literalists. Yeah, they are kind of being literalists about Islam, but they are taking it more than one step further. Because, in the time of Muhammad, there obviously was not the same kind of individual power that exists today, thanks to technology. But that power does exist now and is in the hands of individuals. And moreover, the kind of power that exists in the hands of states did not exist in the time of Muhammad, like atomic weapons, etc. And those kind of powers do exist today. And obviously, Iran is bent on getting that kind of power. And they've said it openly, especially after the 12 days of fighting back in June. They've said openly that they're going to do that now. That they're going to make a bomb. They're going to use that power for that. They've said openly. It's not just about civil, and maybe they'll even give themselves cover by saying, well, it used to be about that, but now you've made us do this. We haven't made them do anything. The West, specifically Israel and the United States, took out their abilities short term to make those weapons. I still argue that it would have been better to finish them off then, to finish off, the Khamenei and his gang of thugs in the IRGC. It would have been better to finish them off in June by whacking Khamenei as the leader of the enemy, right? As that's what happens in war very often. But because Trump wanted his little victory dance to say, oh, we blew up whatever, and he wanted to satiate the woke right, as they call them, to show them, look, I started and finished the war like in a matter of minutes. I'm like the guy. I'm like the superhero guy. I told you it wouldn't be a forever war. You see. So his woke right is like placated temporarily, even though they won't admit it. that he didn't put America into a forever war, but there wouldn't have been any need to drop any of those bombs from the B-2s if Israel had been allowed to just finish the job and end Khomeini. That's the bottom line, because then the IRGC would have been probably much easier to overthrow, because the regular army would have sided with the people in a revolution, and they would have, together still had probably a lot of losses, but still been able to eventually overthrow the IRGC, right? If there's no Khomeini. Even if they had a chain of command and they would have named another supreme ruler, supreme leader guy, it still would have ended fairly quickly. Because nobody who would have just entered office right away would be able to actually, control that situation. It was more than a tempest in a teapot. It was about to blow over, and the people were about to rise up, and you could tell that. That's why even Pahlavi went on television or wherever, made a video, public address, announcing to the people of Iran that now was the time, then was the time to rise up and overthrow the dictators and the dictatorship. But unfortunately, Trump intervened. And look, there's no guarantees, right? There is a probability that had Israel killed Khamenei and not destroyed Fordo and all that, and the people would not. And you can make the argument that, well, at least the U.S. did manage to delay Iran's plans for months, if not years. You can make that argument. There's no guarantee of it. Just like there's no guarantee that my plan would have worked, right? But there's no guarantee that we know that we've definitively knocked out all of their key sites. They might have already sites that are buried since many years that we don't know about, right? They might have those already. We don't know. What we do know is that the world is now in a situation that is more precarious than it was 5 months ago, as a result of, because now the Iranians, as far as they're concerned, all gloves are off. They're regrouping, rearming, retraining, rebuilding, and they've told us they fully intend to build a bomb now. Like, they're not even pretending anymore. That's just for civilian purposes. They're not even pretending. They're literally, what do you expect the West to do at this point? What do you expect Israel to do? What do you expect America to do? To expect those countries to do nothing is sheer folly. Like, utter folly. To expect those countries to go full bore in an unthoughtful way and try to fight Iran head to head, unrealistic. What is likely to happen is we're going to see more special operations, work accidents, things happening in Iran that people may be surprised to find out. You're going to see more of those kind of things where random places just suddenly deconstruct inside of Iran. You're going to find out places in Iran that existed yesterday and no longer do today. And you're going to find out about all kinds of things in Iran that no longer are places in Iran or things in Iran that are formerly things in Iran, whose energy has been transferred into the ether, so to speak. And that's probably going to continue for a while. especially as long as Iran continues to make aggressive moves towards Israel and the United States. And Great Britain, by the way. They are not a fan. Like, most people don't even realize, Iran is not a friend of Great Britain. And when Iran chants death to America, death to Israel, they normally say it in this order: death to America, death to Great Britain, death to Israel, death to the infidels and hypocrites. Like, that's literally the order they chanted in. Now, there are plenty of shorter versions where they just say death to America or death to Israel, or they just say death to America and death to Israel, right? Or death to America, death to Israel, death to the hypocrites and infidels. But death to the UK is like in their main one. They do that one all the time. Like, that's par for the course. If you're from the UK and you don't know that, you probably should. And if you're going to look into it and say, oh, but they hate the UK because the UK did this, that, and the other thing to Iran for so many years, learn a thing about history. And then come back and tell me why you think they really say that. It's not because of one or two things that some Western country did to Iran that the Iranian Islamic dictatorship is the way that it is. They are the way that they are because they're extremist Shia Muslims who believe in a very twisted and warped version. It's that simple. Anyway, that's going to do it for now, folks. I hope you're all well. Bid you all peace. Hopefully this war will end sooner rather than later. And until then, stay safe. Shalom.